On today's episode, we have three cars from October 1971. One arrived as the largest, most completely equipped Chevrolet ever built. Restyled, re-engineered, and so thoroughly finished that the only thing left to do was sell it to people who'd already decided they wanted one. One arrived with a brand new nameplate, a 455 V8, and the particular confidence of something that had replaced a legend and was not yet sure anyone had noticed. And one arrived in its final year, a name that had once beaten Ferrari, reduced to a quiet exit in fuselage styling, with no announcement and no ceremony. Did the most legendary car have the most ordinary ending? This is Four Wheels and Fuel USA, Season 2, Episode 10. Let's find out. Chevrolet Caprice. The 1971 Chevrolet Caprice was the largest passenger car Chevrolet had ever built, and it had arrived at that distinction without any particular embarrassment about it. The Caprice had been completely redesigned for 1971 on a new 121.5-inch wheelbase, with bold fuselage styling that Chevrolet's marketing department described as sculptured, and that everyone else described as large. It was the fourth generation of a model that had started life in 1965 as a trim package on the Impala, and had spent the following 6 years quietly becoming the car that serious buyers chose when they had finished being impressed by the Impala and wanted something that required no further explanation. Under the hood, the standard engine was a 400 V8, which Chevrolet called a turbojet 400, and which was actually a 402, a distinction that mattered to nobody who had not been paying very close attention to the displacement markings and had better things to do. For buyers who wanted the number to be unambiguous, the 454 turbojet was available. 7.4-litre, 285 horsepower net and 465 pound-feet of torque at 3,200 revolutions per minute, backed by the TH400 3-speed automatic that Chevrolet had correctly identified as the only transmission anyone ordering a 454 in a full-size luxury car was going to use. The 454 came standard with dual exhaust and front disc brakes because Chevrolet had decided that at this price and this size, stopping deserved as much attention as going. On the road, the 454 Caprice covered 0 to 60 miles per hour in around 9.5 seconds and reached a top speed of around 115 miles an hour. Numbers that communicated authority rather than urgency, which was the correct communication for a car weighing around 4,040 pounds on a 121.5-inch wheelbase. Fuel economy came in at around 10 miles per gallon. The ride was the Caprice's genuine achievement. The new B-body platform had been engineered to absorb the American interstate so completely that the primary sensory experience was not motion but sound, specifically the sound of the 454 doing very little work at highway speeds. Inside, the Caprice delivered what its exterior promised, and then a measured amount more. Standard equipment included turbo hydromatic, variable ratio power steering, power front disc brakes, cloth and vinyl upholstery, full carpeting, and an interior that Motor Trend described in its May 1971 comparison with the Cadillac DeVille as offering value that made the price difference between the two cars increasingly difficult to justify, which Cadillac's sales department read and filed without comment. The Caprice was everything a full-size American car was supposed to be in October 1971. The Grandville had arrived to suggest that everything was no longer quite enough. Pontiac Grandville. The 1971 Pontiac Grandville was a new nameplate doing an old job, and it had arrived with the chrome, the wheelbase, and the 455 V8 necessary to convince the buyer that the job had always been its. Pontiac had introduced the Grandville for 1971 as its top-of-the-line full-size model, built on the GNC body platform shared with the Oldsmobile 98, the Buick Electra, and the Cadillac DeVille, which meant that the Grandville's formal roofline, stretched wheelbase, and generally ceremonial proportions were not accidental, but deliberately borrowed from the company's most prestigious addresses. The Bonneville, which had occupied this position since 1957, had been demoted. The Grandville had taken its place without being asked whether it was ready. Standard power came from Pontiac's 455 V8, 7.5-litre, 325 horsepower gross, and 455 pound-feet of torque, backed by the TH400 3-speed automatic as standard equipment, along with power steering and power front disc brakes. The 455 was a smooth, torquey engine that had earned its reputation in the GTO and the Firebird, and now found itself in a car that weighed around 4,500 pounds and had no particular interest in the kind of driving that had made those reputations. It delivered its torque at 3,200 revolutions per minute, cruised without complaint at highway speeds, and produced the kind of exhaust note that reminded the driver, in case they had forgotten, that something serious was happening under the hood, which, in a car of this size and purpose, was the correct level of reminder. If you enjoy the stories on 4 Wheels and Fuel USA, you can support the channel by buying me a coffee. Just click the link on the screen or scan the QR code. It helps keep these nostalgic car stories alive. Let's continue. On the road, 0 to 60 miles per hour came in at around 9 seconds. Top speed was around 115 miles an hour. Fuel economy came in at around 10 miles per gallon, which was the price of a 455 in a 4,500 pound car, and which nobody buying a Grandville in October 1971 had factored into the decision. Curb weight sat at around 4,500 pounds, heavier than the Caprice, heavier than the 300, and positioned on its stretched wheelbase with the solemnity of a car that had decided its job was arrival rather than transit. Pontiac built 46,325 Grandvilles in 1971 across all body styles, a respectable number for a first-year nameplate, and a reasonable argument that the Bonneville's customers had followed their loyalty upward without requiring too much persuasion. The Grandville was a competent and handsome car that had replaced a legend and had not yet had time to become one itself. The Chrysler 300 had not needed the time. Chrysler 300. The 1971 Chrysler 300 was the last of something that had once been the most frightening car in America. And it was going out without a press release, without a farewell edition, and without any particular acknowledgement from Chrysler that the name they were retiring had spent 15 years doing things that nobody else had managed to do at any price. The 300 letter series had begun in 1955 with a car that produced 300 horsepower at a time when 200 was considered ambitious, had won NASCAR championships, had beaten Ferrari at Monza in 1957, and had established the template for what an American performance car could be before the muscle car era had a name for it. By 1971, the nameplate had been a non-letter series for 9 years. The fuselage styling had been doing its job since 1969, and Chrysler had decided, without announcement, that this would be the last one. Under the hood sat the 440 TNT, 7.2-litre, 305 horsepower net at 4,800 revolutions per minute and 480 pound-feet of torque at 3,200 revolutions per minute. The most torque of any engine in this comparison by a margin that the Caprice's 454 and the Grandville's 455 came close to, but did not match. The TNT stood for torque and temperature, which was either an engine specification or a naming decision that someone at Chrysler had made on a Friday afternoon and which nobody had subsequently questioned. The Torque Flight 3-speed automatic was the only transmission available. There had not been a manual option on the 300 since the late 1960s, and nobody had asked for one. The 440 delivered its torque in the smooth, unhurried way of an engine that had been living in large Chryslers for years and had long since stopped trying to prove anything to anyone. On the road, the 300 covered 0 to 60 miles per hour in around 8.5 seconds, the quickest of the 3 cars in this episode, in the lightest of the 3 cars, at around 4,385 pounds, with the most torque. Top speed was around 120 miles an hour. Fuel economy came in at around 11 miles per gallon, one better than both competitors, on a car that cost $4,322 at the door, which was $102 less than the Caprice and $384 less than the Grandville. The fuselage styling, rounded, flowing, with concealed headlamps behind the crosshair grille and a rear end that had not changed significantly since 1969, was not new, but it was still the most distinctive body in the segment, and it wore its age with the particular dignity of something that had never needed to shout. Inside, the 300 offered everything the Caprice and Grandville offered, arranged with slightly less emphasis on demonstrating that it was expensive and slightly more emphasis on the assumption that the buyer already knew. Chrysler built approximately 14,300s in 1971 across coupe and sedan body styles, a fraction of the Caprice's volume, a fraction of the Grandville's ambition, and the last of a nameplate that had started in 1955 by redefining what American cars were capable of and ended in 1971 by doing so quietly, at a price that undercut both of its competitors without telling anyone it was leaving. October 1971. Chevrolet built the largest car in its history, equipped it with everything a full-size American buyer could reasonably ask for, and sold it in numbers that suggested the American buyer had no complaints. Pontiac introduced a brand new nameplate, gave it a 455 and a stretched wheelbase, and asked the Bonneville's customers to follow, which most of them did without being asked twice. And Chrysler built the last 300, undercut both of its competitors on price, outran both of them on the road, and closed a nameplate that had once beaten Ferrari without saying a word about it. The Caprice got the sales, the Grandville got the chrome, the 300 got the history. Tell us in the comments if you knew it was the last one. If you enjoyed the video and want to support the channel, you can buy me a coffee. Just scan the QR code on the screen. This is 4 Wheels and Fuel USA Season 2, Episode 10. See you next time.